That's very interesting. I mean, I just want to touch on the point that you say there is a majority client issue. And I would like to understand a little bit, because you already kind of mentioned it, but so for developers will be a richer set of options to choose from, right? Mm-hmm. You wanna say something on that? Like,
Yeah. I'd say that, you know, in the system that we have today, developers or miners rather, and other folks are incentivized to choose what necessarily is kind of the status quo. And the reason for that is that we only want to make sure that we can mine the next block, right, to get that block reward. In proof of stake, it's a little bit different, where the stake itself is important, and as long as everybody's kind of acting in the interest of the network, that we can make sure that the network continues to reach consensus and finalize new transactions and blocks, that the rewards are distributed. So when we have the network with, again, a supermajority of folks running potentially a client that has 66% or more of the network running on one piece of technology, if there are bugs in the software that prevent the network at large from reaching consensus or from reaching, you know, finalizing blocks, we could see penalties across the stake of those clients, which again would be an issue for those folks. And I don't know, Tim, if you want to chime in on that.
Right, like I think one thing that's worth emphasizing is the Ethereum proof of stake algorithm is designed in a way where we want to make it easy for individual validators to do things, even if they not do everything perfectly, still get rewarded. But we also want to avoid centralization points on the network. And a reason for that is, imagine you're at home staking on your own validator and your internet connection goes down. If you're the only one on the entire network who goes offline, the network is fine. The network will keep going along. So we only give you like a small penalty. And on the flip side of that is, if you have, say, a majority client that's running 2/3 of the network and that goes offline, that's more damaging for the network because it influences our ability to have the chain keep progressing, and then we'll raise the penalties much more. And the idea there is that this way you kind of create an incentive for smaller players, for people to run minority clients, and even if they do run into issues, they'll be penalized less harshly than if they're running kind of the default majority option, because basically you don't want to have a failure happening at the same time as everyone else. And this is true even beyond the clients themselves. So for example, if everyone's running on the same cloud provider and that cloud provider goes down, then the penalties will be much higher than if, say, you're running on your home internet and you have a power outage in your city, because that's decorrelated from everyone else. So generally, that's kind of what the rewards and penalties on the proof of stake algorithm in Ethereum optimized for, is just trying to make sure that the vast majority of the network is still working. If there's an issue there, penalize harshly to incentivize people to fix it. But if you're just a smaller participant in the network and you have an issue, we don't want to penalize you harshly because otherwise only professionals would participate.
I hear a lot about incentives and the rewards, and I think those are really key of this conversation. So I'm just asking you something, Tim, out of the box, and I remember that we have this client incentive program, and that's amazing. I know ConsenSys is involved. I mean, you want to expand a little bit. You're such a passionate person in EF, and that's definitely great. So you want to expand a little bit on this client incentive program, and trying to understand how also other people can get involved, how ConsenSys is involved, like what's the basics, and basically why you think this issue is making you that passionate. What do you think about that?
Right. So one thing that's worth noting about Ethereum clients is they are literally the software that powers Ethereum. Like, you think of it as internet browsers for the internet. If they don't exist, it's basically impossible to access the network. The challenge, though, is these clients don't have an easy way to monetize on the network. They're not like a business, like, say, Infura is like a product where you can charge your customers and obviously offer a free tier as well, but there's like a clear path to monetizing that. For something like an Ethereum client, there really isn't. And even if you look at, say, internet browsers today, they monetize them with ads. There's no ads on the Ethereum blockchain, so we can't do that. But one thing that's neat is in proof of stake, all you need is Ether to run a validator on the network, and then you do get rewarded for that. So the EF, over the past couple of years, has worked to basically provide Ether to all of the client teams so that they can run a large amount of validators on the Ethereum network and keep all the rewards from that. So this is nice for a few reasons. One, it makes sure that all those clients are actually production ready, right? Like, if we can trust those teams with millions of dollars, and Just to put this in context, it's April 2021. The program today is worth about $150 million spread across the different teams. So that means that, if we can trust Besu, if we can trust Teku, if we can trust Geth, Aragon, with running tens of millions of dollars on their software, then we can actually go to the entire community and say, look, this software is safe. So that was like the first reason, is like, well, we can get people using it there. The second is, yeah, it does provide like an income stream to these clients, because not only do they run their software, but they get to, they get to keep the rewards and eventually the raw ether as well. And the third is, this does help with client diversity, because we've basically chosen to give the same amount to every client team. So we didn't look at, how many nodes are there on the network. Basically, every team which had like a production-ready client was eligible for the program, and they all got the same amount.
Okay, that's super interesting. And I remember in our last community call, you mentioned this kind of new incentive outside the client incentive program, this CIP on Protocol Guild. And you want to touch on that something? Like, I think that's super cool, and make also these incentives mechanism much higher. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. So Protocol Guild is something I spent some time on outside of my day job at the EF. And the idea there is that the people who maintain these clients are basically kind of the people who keep the network secure. If they go away and these clients stop being maintained, then there's nobody around who can actually fix the network if an issue arises. So we want to make sure that we incentivize them to stay. And one challenge with that is that, as you might be aware, it's very profitable to start a project on Ethereum and just say launch your own DeFi token. And that creates an incentive to have like our best people who are working on the protocol, just move over to start a DeFi project, because there's more financial upside in doing that. And then in parallel to that, you see all of these projects who get very successful on Ethereum and who'd like to give back in a way to the people who support the network. So what Protocol Guild is, it's basically like a self-organized group of core contributors to the protocol. So that includes client developers, researchers, a few coordinators like me. And it's basically a multi-sig on Ethereum, which weights the amount of contributions of all of those people and makes it easy for projects built on Ethereum to donate funds which will vest over time to those contributors. So that means that not only can we kind of we can create kind of more incentives for those people there, we can also capture more upside. So even with the client incentive program that the EF has done, this is denominated in Ether. And Ether is already a huge asset with a huge market cap. So it doesn't have the same sort of upside potential as launching a new DeFi token, for example. And with Protocol Guild, if we can basically get projects across Ethereum to donate a small portion of their supply to this, it allows the contributors working on Ethereum to keep doing this, to capture upsides in the project that are built on Ethereum. And yeah, for those projects to have a simple way to give back, where they don't need to think through, okay, who are the people we should message, which projects do we want to include, exclude. The Protocol Guild basically puts together that list, and you just need to send your funds to a single Ethereum address.
That's super cool. So where you see this, how big you want to have this going? Like, you have any forecast on that? Like,
yeah, I do. So we're launching now. We do want it to be a relatively small amount at start, because the way this is governed, it's governed by all of the members, right? And it takes time, just like on the Ethereum network, it takes time for governance norms to emerge. Like, how do you add people to Protocol Guild? How do you remove them? How do you weight contributions? How do you differentiate someone who's been doing 1 year versus 10 years? So like, we want to work through all these questions when the stakes aren't absolutely crazy high. And also, we're using new smart contracts to do this, and even though they've been audited and everything, we want to be safe with deployment. So our plan is to have a first pilot which runs for about a year, and raise on the order of $10 to $30 million for that. We already raised about 6 from Lido, so I'll say thank you, and are now kind of talking with other kind of major DeFi projects across the space. And so if we can have that amount of funds vested over about a year to roughly 100 people, it gives us like a an experiment where we can try to govern this thing, make sure that it works, make sure the smart contracts work, and then eventually scale it up much more. I think if you believe that Ethereum keeps growing, that the amount of applications on top keep growing, this is something we could get on the order of a couple $1 billion at some point. And I think if we got to roughly those amounts, then we'd have a world where it's kind of economically competitive to be working on the core protocol or to be working at the DeFi layer. And I think that'd be really healthy.
I think we could definitely see something like that in the actually short term. But
hopefully not too short.
Not too short.
You don't want it to go
middle,
too quickly.
middle.
Yeah.